Welcome everyone to the Buildwriting podcast. My name is Oyemi Chinua, and you're welcome to 2024. Now, this podcast is Buildwriting 2.0 podcast. I have been podcasting on and off about writing, creative writing, and for certain reasons, which I'll talk about in this podcast, I have not been consistent. I've tried to say, oh, I'll come back and I'll be consistent. Oh, I've tried to say, oh, I'll be serious about it. But at the end of the day, I'm not serious. And life goes on. And I am like, that thing you want to do, but you're not doing, and you know you should be doing because you love to do it and you really want to do it, but you don't do it. Now, not being consistent on the podcast is not a problem. I found what the problem was. You see, the problem here is the writing itself. I am not an expert. I don't have books published to my name. I don't have stories published to my name. So it's not a matter of like, okay, let me breathe in and breathe out. Let's take it slow so I'm not so fast that my words get mumbled up and chopped up. Yeah. I want to document my life. And because I don't show up to write, to create, there's really nothing to talk about. I feel like an imposter if I tell you, oh, you have to be this, you have to be that. I don't have that. This podcast is to document my journey. It is to create friends along the way. That's the whole goal of the podcast. It's not to come as an expert, which I am not, because I'm struggling to write. I'm a beginner. So now what would happen to Buildwriting 2.0 podcast? Well, it's simple. Every week, you get an episode from me. And with this episode, I will talk about what I'm doing, react to trends and things that I noticed, look at the advice from famous writers and make sense of it, work on something on a project. The writing itself would evolve with me with my creative pursuits. And showing up on the podcast is a way to force myself to get serious with writing so I can have things to talk about. I can look at my life and say, oh, yeah, I wrote a story about this. This is the story. This is what the story is about. And with me recording the podcast, I want to get serious about it. I want to create a community. And I know that if I am serious, the community will come. Yeah, it's more like I'm there. I'm like, nobody's listening to me. And I need to ask myself, have you been talking? And no, I've not been talking, but nobody's listening to me. Well, start talking and they will listen to you. And I'm like, no, they have to start listening before I start talking. And right now I know that I don't have views, people are not listening, people are not subscribed to the podcast because I am not talking yet. Once I start talking, people start listening and the audience will be there. So what is the goal? What is the whole idea of this podcast? The whole goal of the podcast is to create something for writers because right now writing is at the point where people, the whole goal of the podcast is I created the podcast to talk about the life in between. When reading and writing intersect, it forms a Venn diagram. And at that center, that intersection of what is reading and what is writing, of audience that loves reading and loves writing, that is who the Buildwriting podcast is for. And with all these updates, it'll be for me to better create content for you. Now, if you have any questions you want me to talk about, you have ideas for me, send them to me on buildwriting.com/speak. Again, buildwriting.com/speak. And I'll feature it in the podcast. Hopefully, over time, as I published more episodes, I'll get better at communicating and articulating what I mean and what I want to say. Because right now it's been so long since I spoke to any other person other than myself and my friends. Because I need I like I need to really work on that, and I really need to start creating and working on the writing life and all that. So this episode is for this week. My episodes will be coming out on Sunday. As much as I did not want to put out the time, like, oh, this day, I have to put a day. The time sometimes I may miss, I might come late. Um, the episodes will come late, but I have to put a day. And Sunday, on like my newsletter, it's Friday. It comes out every Friday, and for a long time now, I've been consistent with that, and I'm so happy that I've been doing that. So same thing with the podcast, and with my life working and creating, I don't have to stress myself over what I have to talk about. I just create and post, create and post, create and post. So essentially that's the idea. So the action point is I'll be documenting my life, talking about the books I read, the productivity tips and secrets that have been helping me, the advice and quotes I love, what I have been trying, experiments I've been working on, and basically sharing my journey as a writer generously. Now, in future, I could do interviews, but the goal is not just interview. I got to interview someone. I got to interview someone. No, I would try and see if I can set up an interview with persons that have results and created things that I know you'll be interested in. And for those of you that have been listening to me, like I have 2 to 3 persons I think 5 to 10 persons that have been listening to this podcast for the past 2 years or so. They've been consistent. Sometimes it takes a day and then they listen, but I know they've been really consistent listening, and I really want to thank you. And this is my message from me to you, and telling you that I have chosen to take you seriously. Okay, of course, by taking you seriously, I mean that I've chosen to show up for you and for me too. Yeah, to show up for you and for me. And if you go to the website, you see all the episodes, and whatever platform you're listening to, you can subscribe and place a review for me. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This is more of a recommitment from in the forthcoming weeks. You'll be getting episodes from me and me talking about in detail all those things. And before I go, my name is Oyemichi Nwakona. I feel it's important I do an introduction. I am trying to write and create a writing life. Yeah, I do have these things up in my head, but seeing that to write, that's kind of like the struggle. I would write. I've been thinking of getting a writer's notebook. So many things I've been thinking of doing, and getting serious with this writing life of a thing. And now make it be a joke. You understand? This is serious business. Oh, of course. Yeah. And once again, thank you so much for listening. Expect better episodes and better podcast this year. So this episode marks the turning point, marks the beginning, marks the point where the old podcast got to an end, and now we're recreating, and we're making better stuff. Thank you so much for being there on the journey with me.